Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the council. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, please use either the fire exit through the main doors of the hall or the fire exit in the storeroom adjacent to the stage. The fire assembly point is the island in the front of the main entrance to the building. Please note that the meeting will be live streamed. Please switch off all mobile phones or turn them to silent. Please be mindful that this is not a public meeting, but a meeting held for the public. In public, sorry. Before we move to the agenda, I will outline how the meeting will be conducted. This committee determines planning applications in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Decisions must be based on relevant planning considerations only. Members must approach each application with an open mind and must not have predetermined the outcome. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have received apologies from Councillor G. Myers, Substitute Councillor Webb, Councillor Linden, Councillor Brewer, Substitute Councillor Leary. Item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of March 2026. Are the minutes agreed, members? Thank you. Item 3, to receive declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? If you are declaring an interest, please state the interest and the reason why you are declaring that interest. None? Thank you. Item 4, items referred from the weekly list. There are none. Item 5, 25000539 out, land between Mount Bovers Lane and Gusted Hall Lane, Main Road, Hawcourt, Essex. Mr. Arwell, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just as a means of introduction, this application before us is not for determination this evening. The reason for this is that the applicant has appealed to the Planning Inspectorate against non-determination of the application. This meeting is, however, necessary to expedite members' view on those key matters for consideration in order to support and inform the Council's position in respect of the appeal, which is to be heard by means of public inquiry. Whatever members decide tonight will assist the Council in informing its statement of case to the inquiry. So, there we go. So this application seeks outline planning permission in respect of the principled, This application seeks outline planning permission in respect of the principle of the development described above. The application also seeks approval in respect of the site access to the site from Main Road, located to the east of the site, but it does not include all access arrangements within the site itself, which, although indicated by the parameter plans, these details are not known at this time and will be determined by future reserve matters applications, depending on the grant of outline planning permission and how development may come forward in future in terms of incremental development in parcels. As a point of clarification, it is clarified that the site occupies land within both the Hawkwell West Ward, which is north part of the site, and also Roche South Ward, which occupies the southern portion of the site. The scope of the application. This application does not consider those matters which have been placed to one side for future consideration at reserve matter stage, namely layout, landscaping, scale, and external appearance, and including that further elements of access are cited. In order to assess the site and its suitability at this stage, fundamental policy considerations as cited within the officer's report have to be taken into account, including whether this site can deliver quantum and density of development that the Council's own adopted policies would require, including the provision of policy compliant affordable housing and in accordance with the requirements of the National Planning Policy Framework, which promotes the efficient use of land in achieving these objectives. The application must consider at this outline stage a whole range of matters as cited within the report, including the principles of development based on green belt and grey belt considerations, the Council's current 5-year land supply position, site sustainability and infrastructure provision, the provision of accessible green spaces, highway and travel, ecology including species and habitat protection, biodiversity net gain, landscape and visual impacts, the loss of agricultural land, surface water drainage and flood risk, including sequential testing, the impact of the development on trees and heritage assets, archaeology, impacts during development, taking into account noise, dust and vibrations, water quality, impacts on residential amenity, air quality, contamination and airport safeguarding are also relevant considerations at this stage. Other key considerations include sewer infrastructure and connection, cumulative impacts, education, health impacts, economic impacts and equality, and the conditions and commuted sums. So just to explain that the SEND facility would comprise a floor area of 270 metres squared, which are not being considered for approval at this stage, as its floor area will be considered under scale at reserve matter stage, as will the external appearance, layout and associated landscaping. So the SEND would serve as a classroom learning centre and enable pupils to learn both basic theory and practical skills in relation to horticulture and farming. Areas would be allocated to each school to tend and develop, thus allowing the most vulnerable learners access to the great outdoors, an opportunity to learn hands-on and to develop self-esteem and soft skills, which may then lead to future employment. As referenced in the addendum, members will notice that a recent communication received from the applicants indicate that although it was intended that the Zenith Trust would take on the proposed SEND facility, due to the delays in determining the application, this is no longer likely. Notwithstanding this, it is emphasised that the development still includes a provision of a SEND facility. The applicant remains committed to reserving an area for SEND facility and is exploring other operators, and it is understood that there is still a need for such a facility, and this withdrawal by Zenith Trust does not materially impact on the overall case. We'll move on to the slides then. So the first slide is the location plan. The site is located on the settlement edge of Hawkwell on its southern western edge, positioned west of the main road and north of Gusted Hall Lane. It lies at the fringe of the hills which transition towards the floodplain and marshes of Greater Thames Estuary. The area forms part of a broader landscape known as the Upper Roach Valley. Just to give some statistics in terms of its length. So roughly, approximately from northeast to southwest, the site is 600 metres long by 400 metres wide at its widest point. And the area comprises 23.4 hectares, which equates to 230,000 metres squared roughly, based on 1 hectare equating to 10,000 square metres. And you can see it's characterised by fields and boundaries. We'll see that on the next plan. So, and then on the scheme also it will comprise 12.1 hectares of developable area with 11.3 hectares of open space. And we'll move on to slide 2. So the purpose of this slide is to indicate the relative position of the site in terms of the built-up areas of Hockley and Rayleigh and Rochford and Ashington, because these are referred to in the Greenbelt assessment as those built-up areas. So we'll move on to the aerial plan. This plan is quite useful. So this plan shows the position of the site in red here. So what we've got here is we've got Hockley Woods, site of special scientific interest. We've got Gusted Hall Woods and we've got Potash Woods here. And then you can obviously see the road network. So that's quite a good indicator of the land uses and some of the natural features, particularly the woodland areas, which form part of the recognition of the URV1 policy around the green lung within the Upper Roach landscape area. What I'm going to do now is show you just a few photographs. So this photograph is taken looking north-northeast from Gusted Hall Lane. So you can see the settlement, the edge of Hawkwell in the background there. We'll move on to the second picture. This is a view looking north-northwest aspects towards Mount Bover's farmhouse, so in the distance here. And it's perceptible within the images that the land rises. And we'll move on to the next picture, which emphasises this. This picture is still taken from Gusted Hall Lane, and it does show the increase in land levels as you go from east to west. So over a 600-metre distance, the actual drop from west to east roughly is 22 metres. Okay, so we'll just move on to the next slide. So this is an image looking down from the top of the site down towards in an easterly direction. On the left, you've got Mount Bover's Lane here. And this green finger here is not a statutory rights of way, but it's evident that it's clearly being used by local people and accessing through the gate at the bottom. We will now then go on to the highway details, which is part of the outline, so it's important that members have this. So, right, this plan here, trying to explain the plan. So what this plan shows is a new access here with a 6 metre wide access with 10 metre radii, access radii. And basically there's a splitter island here. So traffic coming from Hockley, turning right, would go into a splitter island. And then basically where the location is, it's an optimum location. And the reason for this is there's 43, at a point set back 2.4 from the edge of the carriageway, there's a forward visibility in each direction of 43 metres approximately. And what we've got here is we've got pedestrian access and cycle access onto the lane here, and we've got some raised footways here, and there's some tactile paving. So this access design has been designed with also not only vehicles in mind, but also pedestrians in mind. And there's also a pedestrian footway here as well. So that's the access details. And basically, we'll come to the highway implications and what the conclusions are on that in a short while. So what we'll do now is just quickly show members an illustrative master plan. So the plans I'm going to show you now, members, are not plans for approval, but they're illustrative only to basically demonstrate that the developable area will be within this area here. The 12 hectares or so of developable area, and you can see this is how the scheme might emerge. But two key features that I do want to point out to members is these drainage lagoons here, which are key to the informing the surface water drainage plans. And then we've got the open space area here towards the west of the site.
Excuse me, this is not a public meeting. If I can ask you to sit down, please. It's for the council. Thank you.
Okay. So the next slide is a parameter plan, and it's a land use plan. So it just reinforces the principle and concept of land use within the site and the split between the developable areas and the open space. And the developable area is that area highlighted in, shaded in pink. So we'll move on to the density plan. So what this plan seeks to show is basically density. So in order to comply with policy, it needs to achieve a certain density. So at this stage, it's to demonstrate that in principle, the policy compliant densities can be achieved. So the lowest densities of up to 21 dwellings per hectare would be the shaded area here, the lower densities, and that actually coincides with the edge of the site and proximity to Mount Bover's Lane. Then the shaded pink is the mid density, which is area 2, which is 31 dwellings per hectare. And then the third segment here is the higher densities, which are going to be delivering somewhere in the region of 31 dwellings per hectare. And then we just move on quickly to this plan, which basically highlights that at reserve matters stage, the concept plan is based on that there will be character areas within the site. And then this is the SEND facility here. We'll move on. This is a movement parameters plan. So it just shows you've got the Saffron Trail coming along here. You've got some long distance paths. You've got joining it below Gusted Hall. You've got Roch Valley Way. So it's just basically showing how movement will work in terms of pedestrians, movements, cycles. This is an important plan, this one, this slide. So this is a blue and green infrastructure parameters plan. And what this plan shows is the drainage lagoons here at the east of the site. You've got some swales in the center of the site, and these swales will coincide with movement corridors where you've got green corridors, and within them you'll have these swales, and then this is the area of open space, and these are the developable areas. So the concepts are outlined, are quite clearly set out. And we're just moving on to the latter part of this presentation. So members might wonder what this might look like. So some of these character areas, they may look and feel something like this. And this one here, so you'd have these, this would be a movement corridor, and you'd have your swales in here. So that just gives members an idea of the concepts at this stage, at least. And there's just a few more slides. And then this is what the SEND facility might look like. Okay, so we'll move on now to the key issues. In terms of the summary of key issues and conclusion section of the report. So we're going on to the green and grey belt considerations. So the purpose of this plan is to show members the position of the site within the Metropolitan Green Belt. You can also see the location of the large built-up areas within the district, and the green areas are the remaining areas of green belt in the district. So national policy identifies that appropriate development is by definition harmful to the green belt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. Development in the green belt is considered inappropriate unless one of the exceptions identified in paragraph 154 or 155 of the NPPF applies. There is no relevant exemption in paragraph 154. The only exemption in paragraph 155 requires consideration in relation to the proposed development. Paragraph 155 states that the development of homes, commercial and other developments in the green belt should also not be regarded as inappropriate where the following would apply. The development would utilise grey belt land and would not fundamentally undermine the purposes to get taken together of the remaining green belt across the area. B, but there's a demonstrable unmet need for the type of development proposed. And C, the development would be in a sustainable location with particular reference to paragraphs 110 and 115 of the framework. Now, in assessing this matter, therefore, we need to ask ourselves the fundamental question in terms of whether it is grey belt, and also under consideration D, we need to consider whether the development meets the golden rules requirements set out in paragraph 156 and 157 of the framework. So firstly, is the site, whether it's grey belt? Firstly, whether the application site constitutes grey belt, which requires assessment of the site's contribution to the relevant green belt purposes identified in paragraph 143 A, B and C. So the purposes of the remaining green belt. And secondly, if the land is grey belt, whether the development would nevertheless fundamentally undermine the purpose of the remaining green belt when taken across the area of the plan as a whole. There are separate tests. The first concern characteristics of the site itself, whereas the second requires a wider judgment as to the effect of the proposal on the integrity and functioning of the green belt as a whole. In addressing whether the land constitutes grey belt, the PPG advises, the planning policy guidance advises that in that this exercise is a matter of planning judgment and should not be undertaken as a mechanistic assessment. It requires consideration of both constraints inherent to the land and any feature which may reduce its contribution to greenbelt purposes, including containment, urban influences and relationships to settlement edges. The application site's contribution has therefore been assessed, taking into account both its constraints and opportunities using the PPG guidance set out below. Purpose A, checking unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas. In respect of Purpose A, there are clear constraints associated with the site. The land is currently undeveloped and forms a part of a wider countryside. It is therefore contributes to greenbelt openness and in isolation performs a role in preventing the outward spread of built development. However, the PPG advises that land is less likely to strongly contribute to this purpose where there are features which contain development or where land is influenced by urbanizing features. In this regard, it is considered that the site which sites immediately adjacent to the built-up area of Hawkle and Hockley is therefore not isolated from the urban edge. There are strong and recognisable physical boundaries, including the B1013, Mount Bovers Lane, Gusted Hall Lane, established hedgerows and woodland blocks, which are capable of containing development. The site is further influenced by existing residential developments and highway infrastructure along its eastern and northern boundaries. The submitted land use parameter plan indicates that the proposed development has been designed to concentrate built form in the lower eastern portion of the site, whilst retaining the higher western land as open space, thereby limiting the extent of encroachment and avoiding protruding or finger-like form of development. Having regard to the above, whilst the site does make a contribution to preventing urban sprawl, this contribution is moderated by the presence of defensible boundaries and urban influences, resulting in a rounding off of the settlement edge, rather than introducing an isolated incursion of development. In conclusion, the site is not considered to strongly contribute to the greenbelt purpose. We then move on to Purpose B, which is preventing neighbouring towns from merging into one another. As you can see from the plan, I think the conclusions that can be drawn in this regard is that given this development and where it is, the conclusions are that basically it wouldn't result in towns merging into one another. Overall, the development would not result in a tangible perception of coalescence between settlements when viewed in the wider landscape context. Having regard to the PPG, it is considered that the site does not perform a critical role in maintaining separation between settlements and does not strongly contribute to Purpose B. Purpose D, preserving the setting and special character of historic towns. It is considered that the site does not make a meaningful contribution to preserving the setting of a historic town. So the overall conclusions on Greybelt, when viewed on its merits and drawing together the above strands, it is considered that the site makes a moderate, not strong contribution to Purpose A. The site makes a limited contribution to Purpose B. The site makes a weak contribution to Purpose D. In applying the definitions set out in the framework and PPG, the site is therefore not considered to strongly contribute to any of these purposes. Accordingly, it is considered that the land constitutes Greybelt for the purposes of paragraph 155A. The second test in relation to definition of Greybelt requires that none of the matters listed in footnote 7, i.e. national landscape, a national park, or defined as heritage assets, irreplaceable habitats, designed heritage assets, it means that basically for that to apply, none of the following apply. So basically, because the site is within the Upper Orch Special Landscape Area, however, it's not a national landscape, which is the national landscape is the successor of what was the areas of outstanding natural beauty. So if the site was a national landscape, footnote 7 would apply. So would the development fundamentally undermine the remaining purposes of the Greenbelt? To be acceptable, Greenbelt development at paragraph 155A requires proposals to comply with all criteria A to C and where applicable, criterion D. So we've mentioned that it would utilise grey belt land. Purpose E we haven't covered, which is to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging and recycling derelict and other urban land. It is considered unlikely that the development of this scale would find a location on non-green belts. This assertion is supported by the applicant's alternative site assessment. So we move on to the question, a fundamental question: would the development, would it not fundamentally undermine this purpose, or would it undermine the purpose? The site forms a small proportion of the overall extent of green belt within the district, and a substantial area of open space would be retained within the site itself. The remaining green belt across the area of the plan would continue to perform all 5 purposes set out in paragraph 143 in a meaningful way, and there is no evidence that the release of this site would compromise the overall integrity or strategic function of the green belt. Therefore, it is considered that, having regard to national policy and guidance, the proposed development would not fundamentally undermine the purposes of the remaining green belt across the plan area. To that extent, the proposal complies with paragraph 155A. Criterion B, we ask the question whether there's a demonstrable unmet need for the type of development, and there is. And why is there a need for the development? And this is because of the council's 5-year housing land supply. The need is demonstrated as evidenced by this. The council publishes 5-year housing land supply statement as of the 1st of April 2025. It reports on the housing completions as of March 31st, 2025, and the supply of deliverable sites for the subsequent 5-year period. 1st of April 2025 to the 31st of March 2030. The figures provided in this statement should be taken as the council's definitive 5-year land supply position. Using the standard government methodology, Rochford local housing need equates to 689 homes per year. With a required 5% buffer, the annual target rises to 723 homes, or a total requirement of 3,617 dwellings over the next 5 years. The council can only identify 1,425 deliverable units for this 5-year period. As a consequence, the council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, officially falling short at a 1.97-year supply. And because the supply falls significantly below the 5-year threshold, the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies. As such, the tests applied by paragraph 155B of the NPPF are met. We're moving to the end of the grey belt assessment. We need to just mention criterion C. Would the development be in a sustainable location with particular reference to paragraph 1110 and 1111 of this framework? The site lies at the edge of the settlement and at a distance from key services and facilities, including Hockley Town Centre and the railway station. So we've concluded the paragraph 10 of the framework is clear that assessments should include whether a site can be made sustainable, and therefore it is necessary to consider the extent to which this development would improve sustainability over time. The proposed development includes a number of measures and characteristics which would materially enhance the sustainability of the site over time. So it is our conclusion that the application does meet the golden rules. So in terms of policy compliance, it's our conclusion the proposed development provides affordable housing, it provides infrastructure improvements, which are referred to by the Section 106 contributions, it's providing a SEND facility, it's providing accessible open space. So there are a number of factors that in terms of which we've concluded on the basis of grey belt that the development does meet that definition. We'll move on briefly to landscape and visual impacts. The reason for bringing this slide up is to show you the site within its wider landscape setting. You've got Hockley Woods, you've got the green belt. And just to summarise on this matter, the paragraph 187 of the framework makes reference to planning policies and decisions contributing to and enhancing the natural and local environment. So the key themes within the landscape and visual aspect and the framework is protecting, enhancing valued landscapes and the beauty of the countryside, and recognising the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. The application has been accompanied by a landscape and visual impact assessment, which has considered impacts of the development in terms of landscape character and also visual impacts. An important distinction to be made is that the landscape effects are caused by physical changes to the landscape, which may result in change to the distinctive character of that landscape and how it is perceived. Visual effects are change to what can be seen by people as a result of what is proposed. A visual assessment assesses the change in visual amenity undergone by people, either individually or in groups, that would arise from any change in the nature of the views experienced. We've already said that the site lies in the Upper Roch designated landscape area. We've acknowledged that the policy ELA3 Upper Roch Valley of the Council's local development framework is a key consideration. The core strategy states that the Upper Roch Valley will be protected from development which would undermine the area's role as a green space, providing informal recreational opportunities. It also supports the expansion of Cherry Orchard Jubilee Country Park and the creation of links with other parts of the Upper Roch Valley. The conclusions really in terms of the landscape and visual impacts is the effects on the landscape and character. There'll be a major adverse, they range basically from major adverse significance to no change and neutral significance. And I think the best way to describe the visual impact is, I'll just give you an example. So you've got Roch Valley Way coming down here. So it is acknowledged that from close range, given the development of this scale, there will be perceptible changes within that landscape to the people who are obviously walking along those paths. Right, okay. Overall, no significant residual effects are identified to contextual landscape receptors. What this means is there are no trees, no hedges being ripped up, so that landscape will accommodate that scheme. It's not actually destructing existing landscape features, but obviously that's going to be introduced into the landscape. So summary and conclusions on landscape is, it's not significantly harmful to the character of the special landscape area, but there will be major moderate effects.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, this is a meeting of the council. If you can't respect the council and let people talk, then I'm afraid I will have to clear the public gallery. I don't want to do that. You are going to hear members speaking. You may not like what they've got to say, but they have the right to speak. Council officers have the right to speak. Please don't make me clear the room. I don't wish to do it. Thank you.
Just to conclude on the landscape and visual. So the summary and conclusions on landscape and visual impacts is that there'll be no significant harm. There will be harm, but there won't be significant harm to the character or integrity of the special landscape area, but there will be major moderate effects within the site and immediate context, and the number of visual receptors within the site and around the site. So the further away you get from the site, the less will be the visual impact, basically. So we'll move on now to highway considerations. So a transport assessment has been submitted indicating daily vehicular movements and trips created as a consequence of the development. While the figures quoted are based on historic trends, not the future vision for the site, there is no contradictory evidence to question the validity of the submitted information, which has been subject of scrutiny by Essex Highways as statutory consultee, who offer no objection to the proposed development. Officers are of the view that the development is acceptable because the key test of highway impacts is whether there would be a severe impact to the highway network, and the answer is no, there would be no severe impact to the highway network. And these issues in terms of highways are covered by conditions 22 to 25. Connectivity and travel. The site is encompassed by a network of walking and cycle routes that enhances connectivity to the surrounding natural and urban areas. The Saffron Trail, a 71-mile long distance footpath which stretches from the Southend-on-Sea to Saffron Walden, runs adjacent to the site's western boundary. This route also connects Cherry Orchard Jubilee Park in the south with Hockley Woods via the site and forms part of the walking routes within the Upper Orch Valley. To the northwest of the site, you've got Hockley Woods, Great Bullwood, Hall Woods, etc. So our conclusions on connectivity and travel, given the mitigation and the embedded mitigation within the suggested section 106, there's a financial contribution of 1,084,000 towards bus service improvements as cited within condition 5, as in point 5, sorry, of the recommended head of terms. Ecology, I'm going to cover this very quickly. An ecological assessment has been undertaken, which covers a whole range of considerations. The site, although being close to Hockley Woods, which is a site of special scientific interest, does not affect the integrity of this designated site, whilst the impacts of the development in terms of recreational pressures on the Crouch and Roast estuaries, special area of conservation and special protection areas, is mitigated through RAMS tariff and also by the creation of significant areas of open space, which mitigates any impact on European protected species and habitat. Also, a farmland bird compensation strategy, i.e. off-site compensation, to compensate for the loss or displacement of any farmland birds is covered at point 14 of the heads of terms. So the summary on ecology is no harmful impacts subject to conditions and the subject matter of the heads of terms. And the same is with biodiversity. There'll be a 23+% biodiversity net gain. We go then on to the loss of agricultural land. The land is not characterized as best and most versatile land. And the answer to why is that the case? Because the land is 3B, is designated by Natural England as 3B. Best and most versatile land is grade 1, 2, and 3A. So there is no issue in terms of loss of agricultural land, or most versatile, best and most versatile. I'm going to move on now quickly before ending the presentation. I'm going to refer back to the surface water drainage and SUDS, because this is a very important point. Just move back to this slide. So, will the development, the question that we have to ask ourselves in terms of surface water drainage is, will this development make the situation any worse? No, it won't, as it will help to mitigate the current effects, where in times of high rainfall, the surface water flow overtops the site and also discharges from ditches onto the highway. So we are quite aware that in times of very heavy rainfall, that water does spill onto the highway. The idea behind the drainage strategy is that you've got captured water within this green area, corridor area here within the swales. You've got water that is going to be contained within these attenuation ponds. So swales and attenuation ponds are shown on the blue and green infrastructure plan before you. Will slow down runoff rates within the lagoons being connected by a pipe with an overflow control valve, such at the point of overflow, when the actual water leaves the site, basically there'll be a neutral effect because there'll be less water running onto that road as a result of these embedded mitigation measures. So I think that's the main thing. The fact that the site is within a critical drainage area, I'm just going to describe. So what is a critical drainage area? It's a discrete geographic area, usually a hydrological catchment, where multiple or interlinked sources of flood risk cause flooding during a severe rainfall event, thereby affecting people, property, or local infrastructure. These areas have been defined by the hydraulic catchment, which is largely influenced by the topographical profile of the land. However, other factors such as local geology, surface roughness, and drainage networks are also considered. This approach links the source of rainfall to the properties at risk of flooding via a critical flow path and enables surface water flood risk to be managed most holistically within the geographical area. So in terms of the lead local flood authority, it has provided the authority with a view on surface water drainage. It initially objected, but then further information was submitted in terms of a revised flood risk assessment. And on the basis of the lead local flood authority acknowledging, as it contains, the lead local flood authority is the statutory body that produces these maps that show critical drainage areas. In their consultation response of no objection, They've taken into account clearly as well that the site is within a critical drainage area. And what is very important to emphasise is just because a site's within a critical drainage area, it doesn't mean that it's unacceptable for development. It means that very often you need some embedded mitigation. So that's very important. We're moving on. So in terms of flood risk, there is no greater flood risk. It's in a flood zone 1. The sequential test, there's commentary around the sequential testing, so the report does cover this in detail. I'm not going to repeat it, but the PPG is very, very clear around when the sequential test applies. The sequential test does not apply in this case. The heritage assets, we're coming to the close of the presentation. We'll just go to one of the slides here, slide 29. 37. So this plan here shows the heritage assets. So you've got Mount Bover's farm here, you've got Swain's farmhouse here, Gusted Hall, and so basically you've got, number 1, Swain's farmhouse, you've got Mount Bover's farmhouse here, you've got Potash Cottage here, and you've got Gusted Hall here. So overall, there is going to be harm to the setting of these heritage assets, but it's at the lower end of the harm. So the conclusions is there's a less than substantial harm identified, but however, this is outweighed by the public benefits arising from the proposed development, meeting the key tests in paragraph 2.215 of the framework. So we're just coming to the end of the report. So in terms of noise, dust and vibrations, that is covered in terms of the conditions 9 and 10 and the construction management plan. So we're quite aware that during the construction phase, there'll be a lot of disruption, but that is covered through conditions, which is the normal way to control that. And it's the same with contamination, just standard conditions. So we come on to the last 2 items, which is London Southend Airport safeguarding. The council does not currently agree with the basis of the LSA objection and would be referring the matter to the Civil Aviation Authority. So since the LSA's holding objection was issued, a stage 1 filtering assessment based on currently published instrument flight procedure assessment has been undertaken. This assessment has identified no conflict with existing flight procedures and confirms that the development would not give rise to safeguarding concerns. This is based on the parameters that no development would exceed the height of any operational crane on site, this being 18 metres, and based on an above ordnance datum ground height of 48.23 metres and 66.23 metres. However, the continued holding objection reflects LSA's position, London Southend Airport that is, that a full stage 2 IPF assessment is required to test the development against the potential future instrument flight procedure assessments, which are being considered and awaiting approval by the Civil Aviation Authority. The London Southend Airport have explained that a stage 2 assessment is intended to assess the application against standards which are currently under consideration by the Civil Aviation Authority and may never be adopted. So it's in view of this circumstances, we suggest that we would be referring the matter to the Civil Aviation Authority. So we come to the last section, which is the sewer infrastructure connection. So the issues around the sewer connection is capacity, connection, and strategic decisions to connect new homes to the sewer system. The concern is the additional flows increasing the risk of spills and therefore pollution and flood risk. That was the initial concern set out by Anglian Water. Section 71 of the Town and Country Planning Act has the power to impose conditions, providing they meet the key tests around reasonableness and so forth. Section 106 of the Water Industry Act 1991 provides for a right to connect to the public sewer, such that water undertakers cannot refuse a connection. So as you see from paragraph 2335 of the report, it would be lawful to impose a Grampian condition on a planning permission restricting the commencement or occupation of a development until undercapacity sewage infrastructure is improved, where there is evidence that the current infrastructure does not have the capacity. So the conclusion is that the lack of capacity currently would not be a reason to find the development unacceptable, and the use of a grampian condition as suggested by condition 44 would be acceptable. We're closing the presentation. So all right. So in terms of the planning balance, basically, in essence, the scheme has benefits and disbenefits. There's going to be an effect on the special landscape area, but that effect is going to be at the lower end of harm, according to the landscape visual impact assessment. There's going to be benefits from the provision of the infrastructure, which are secured through the Section 106 contributions. And I'm just going to highlight, bullet point what they are. So there's health contributions of 274,000, education, primary education, 2,147,000, libraries, a developer contribution of 27,000, recreation avoidance, that's the tariff, and sustainability and connectivity, I mentioned 1,084,000 towards improvements to the bus service. And then we'll just move on to the last section. So the biodiversity net gain, financial contribution of 10,606 index linked. Affordable housing, there's going to be 50% affordable housing. Waste management contributions, open space, employment skills, and then the farmland bird compensation. So it is very much a balancing of the benefits against the disbenefits. And the recommendation, as was put forward, including the subject of the heads of terms, is as the recommendation sits, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. We have 4 speakers this evening, ladies and gentlemen. First one is the Right Honourable Mark Francois, MP. If you'd like to come up, sir. I will allow you 5 minutes. I will let you know when you have 1 minute left. When you're ready, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the local MP, I have firmly opposed this development from the outset. And now I know why. I wrote a detailed objection letter last August where I specifically requested an opportunity to address this committee when the time came. So I'm grateful to the committee for allowing me to highlight tonight that literally thousands of my constituents are very strongly opposed to this proposal, as am I. I have 5 very specific reasons, all consistent with planning law, why this application should be refused in advance of the September public inquiry to which I've already asked to give evidence. Firstly, because the site is explicitly excluded from development under Rochford District Council's current local plan. Policy ELA 3 specifically says the core strategy states that the Upper Roach Valley be protected from development, which will undermine the area's role as a green space, providing informal recreational opportunities. Moreover, policy URV1 declares the council will strive to see the Upper Roach Valley become a vast green lung, providing informal recreation opportunities for local residents. The council will protect the area from developments that will undermine the same. In other words, the proposal is totally contrary to Rochford Council's own local plan, which is not out of date, as the officer's report mistakenly implies, not least as the new local plan has not even been finalised yet alone adopted. The report is wrong. Secondly, the site is firmly located within the Metropolitan Greenbelt. Para 142 of the National Planning Policy Framework states, the fundamental aim of Greenbelt policy is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. Any developer who wishes to override the Greenbelt protection needs to demonstrate there are very special circumstances that apply. And it is evident from this application, absolutely no such very special circumstances exist. The attempt to reclassify the area as grey belt to get around this is clearly ludicrous. You only have to visit the site to see for yourself it is virgin green belt. Thirdly, the loss of civic amenity. The Upper Roach Valley is extremely important to my constituents. They use it for dog walking, jogging and other recreational activities, all of which contribute significantly to their well-being and their quality of life. Approving this development on that green space would have an important deleterious effect on their amenity. Fourthly, the site is unsustainable in planning terms, being heavily reliant on private cars for travel to and from. It's immediately adjacent to the B1013, which is already one of the busiest B roads in the country, especially in the morning and evening peak. Given this, I believe the site is highly unsustainable in planning terms, which is increasingly important to the planning inspectorate, including at the appeal stage. Fifth, Anglian Water has formally objected to the application, both in terms of the ability to cope with foul water or sewage and surface water disposal. Their objection letter states, I quote it, "The proposed development flows would go to the Rochford Depot pumping station. The pumping station is a critical asset that is currently running high and does not have the capacity to accommodate additional flow. There's a sewer overflow at the pumping station, which is currently exceeding the acceptable spill count set by the Environment Agency. Any additional flows will increase the risk of spills and therefore pollution and flood risk. Moreover, the application completely fails to identify what's called a substantial point of connection or spot. In other words, the plug that would connect it to the sewer network. This is a major weakness in the application, and one which the officer's report conveniently attempts to gloss over with no definitive solution proposed. The application could be legitimately refused on this one point alone. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I'm speaking tonight as the local MP. I'm not a councillor. I don't sit on this committee, and therefore I don't have a vote on this planning application or indeed on any other. However, I do have a voice, and I use it to urge this committee to refuse this rancid application for the 5 reasons I've given and will not repeat. Only a refusal will do. If the committee defer this, you've effectively surrendered before the public inquiry, which is about the council's failure to determine the decision to date before the inquiry has even begun. So please listen to the Centre.
Thank you, Mark.
And the people of this district and reject the application.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The next speaker we had is Madhair Nair from Smart Planning. If you'd like to come up again, you have 5 minutes. I will let you know when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in relation to this item. I'm a senior planning consultant acting on behalf of the Save Mount Bovers community group. As members will be aware, an appeal has been lodged by the applicant against the council's non-determination of the application. The community group have been granted Rule 6 status for the public inquiry. I've already submitted a detailed written letter to members and kindly ask that you have regard to it today alongside my speech. For the avoidance of doubt, the group's position is that this application should be refused, and I will outline the reasons for doing so today. First, turning to the matter of housing supply, it is recognised that the council can only demonstrate 1.97 years against the requirement for 5. As such, the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies. This is commonly referred to as the tilted balance, where planning permission must be granted unless the application of greenbelt policies provide a strong reason for refusal, or where adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The application before you today fails on both counts. The site lies within the Metropolitan Greenbelt, wherein new development is generally restricted. The applicant's case for planning permission rests on the claim that the site qualifies as greybelt. To constitute greybelt land, the site must not contribute strongly to purposes A, B, or D of the Greenbelt. The Council's own Greenbelt study, published in 2020, confirms that this site contributes strongly to 4 out of 5 purposes, including A and B, and that release of this land would amount to high harm to the Greenbelt. In their recommendation for the current application, officers no longer consider this contribution to be significant, a position that is difficult to reconcile with the Council's own evidence-based data. The site does not constitute greybelt land, the development is inappropriate, and circumstances put forward by the applicant are not very special, nor do they outweigh the high level of harm caused to the Greenbelt. It follows that the application of Greenbelt policies provide a strong reason for refusing the development. The site also lies within the Upper Roach Valley Special Landscape Area, a designated green lung protected by development plan policies. Again, the council's own landscape character study confirms that this is a highly valued landscape with medium to high sensitivity. Policy URV1 requires the protection of this land from development that would undermine the objective of keeping this land open. 350 new dwellings on 12 hectares of undeveloped land within this designation would cause irreversible harm to this special landscape, which has had a continuous legacy of openness since the plan was adopted. Though landscaping measures may provide some mitigation, it is not a redeeming quality of the scheme. The development would still result in loss of important and valued landscape views, which we consider is a significant adverse impact in landscape terms. In their agricultural land classification report, the applicant classifies the land as grade 3B. The report, however, contains fundamental flaws. An example of this is the soil sample results, which identify over 40% of soil samples taken as grade A, best and most versatile land. Despite this, the report records 100% of the land as grade 3B, a clear contradiction which undermines its validity. The framework is clear that where significant development of agricultural land is necessary, poorer quality land should be preferred. The application clearly conflicts with this objective. Lastly, turning to the matter of flood risk, the site lies within a critical drainage area, at risk from both surface water and ordinary watercourse flooding, as confirmed in the applicant's own flood risk assessment. The framework and PPG require sequential tests in these circumstances. Officers take an opposing view that the sequential test is not needed. However, ordinary watercourse flooding is distinct from surface water flooding. Thus, the PPG exemption relied on by officers is not applicable. The sequential hierarchy has not been suitably explored. Thus, the development is not compliant with national policy on flood risk. Chair and members, I am conscious that a non-determination appeal is ongoing. A resolution to refuse today matters as it will formally establish the council's position on these grounds and will carry real weight before the inspector at the upcoming public inquiry. The community group appreciates the need for housing and this should not be ignored. However, the grounds for refusal are clear in this case. The reasons are evidenced by the council's own data and they are very compelling. On this basis, I respectfully urge members to resolve to refuse planning permission. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Can we have Councillor Colin Morris, Hawkwell Parish Council, please? Again, Councillor, you'll have 5 minutes and I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left.
Please bear with me because this is all new for me. I'm here on behalf of Hawkwell Parish Council. I stand before you today, I say on behalf of Hawkwell Parish Council, to deliver our formal consolidated objection to the outline planning application for 350 homes on the Mount Bovis site. Our objection is not based on mere emotion. It's a detailed, evidence-based position rooted firmly in national and local planning policies. It is our absolute conviction that this proposal is fundamentally unsustainable, procedurally flawed, and is direct conflict with Rochford District Council's own strategic objectives. Hawkwell Parish Council officially declared a climate emergency in January 2022. We actively work to reduce our carbon footprint and protect our natural environment. We cannot stand by and allow the destruction of our vital green spaces. We urge this council to refuse this application on 3 critical material considerations: the illegal destruction of the green belt, the unacceptable intrusion into a protected landscape, and the unquantified risk to our historic heritage. Point 1, myth of the grey belt. Let us begin with the developer's central justification. Taylor Wimpey claims this land is grey belt and therefore appropriate for development. This claim is demonstrably false. Rochford District Council's own 2020 Greenbelt study explicitly identifies this specific land as making a strong contribution to the Greenbelt's core purposes. The study concludes that releasing this land would cause high harm. This development is not a minor infill. It's a low density urban sprawl onto active arable agricultural land and natural habitats. The developer attempts to exploit the council's current housing land supply shortfall by claiming very special circumstances. But let us be clear, A housing shortage alone does not meet the high legal threshold required to destroy the Greenbelt. The National Planning Policy Framework states that very special circumstances must clearly outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt. This proposal offers no compelling community benefits, such as a small rural exception site or a self-build project, to meet that threshold. The profound harm to the openness, permanence and infrastructure of our local landscape cannot be outweighed by singular benefit of adding commercial housing. Point 2, intrusion into a protected landscape. Secondly, this 350 home development represents an unacceptable and damaging intrusion into the Upper Roach Valley, a designated special landscape area. The Upper Roach Valley is recognised as a vital green lung, bounded by Rayleigh, Hockley, Rochford and Southend. Under your own policy, URV1, this council committed to protecting this unique sensitive character and creating the right conditions for flora and fauna to flourish with minimum interference. Furthermore, the council's 2019 landscape character study designates this as a highly valued landscape with limited area and ignores essential heritage laws. It violates Rochford's core strategy and the NPPF. We must protect the character and openness of our environment from urban sprawl. We urge the council to stand by its own adopted policies, respect the climate emergency and refuse this fundamentally flawed application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will ask, ladies and gentlemen, that if you, obviously there are different views, if we can respect the speaker until they're finished and then obviously remain quiet, I would hope. Mr. Stuart Blakely, please, from Taylor Wimpey, London. Again, sir, you will have 5 minutes.
Okay.
And I will let you know when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to address the committee regarding the proposed development. Members will be aware that the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, so there is pressing need for housing, including affordable homes in the district. The considerable lack of 5-year housing land supply in itself constitutes very special circumstances for development in the Greenbelt. The site meets grey belt criteria set out in the National Planning Policy Framework and as confirmed in the officer's report. This proposal would make a meaningful contribution to market and affordable housing needs by delivering high quality, sustainable homes, as well as providing a SEND community facility. This is a very weighty benefit in an area where increasing the supply of market and affordable homes is an urgent issue. The site meets the NPPF golden rules by proposing 50% affordable homes, infrastructure improvement, and providing publicly accessible green space of 11.3 hectares. This is a substantial area of open space that would be available to new and existing residents. Although the site is currently undeveloped, it is privately owned farmland with no public rights of way on the site itself. Recreation and children's play areas, ecological areas, and walking and cycling routes are also proposed. Financial benefits to the scheme have already been mentioned. Economic and social benefits of the proposal include the creation of around 211 construction jobs and a further estimated 279 jobs more widely via the supply chain. We therefore consider that the benefits of the proposal tilt the planning balance in favour of this sustainable site and respectfully request members support the application before them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to allow some ward members to speak this evening. First ward member I have is for Roach South, Councillor T. Callaghan. Not here, okay. A. Marriott? You can.
May I speak as a committee member, Chairman? I've got some questions.
You can.
Thank you very much.
He's not here, is he? Okay. Councillor Booth, please. Again,
Thank,
councillor, 5 minutes, and
Yep.
I'll let you know when you have one. Thank you.
thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak this evening. Since there are so many concerns regarding this development, whether they be the issue of flooding, the lack of infrastructure in terms of roads, sewage or drainage, public services in terms of medical facilities such as doctors and dentists, coping with hundreds more patients. Also public transport. We have heard tonight that £1 million is being donated, but it's my understanding that will be for 3 years. What happens after that time? The people will still be there, but will the bus service be gone? Of course, such a litany of concerns fails to mention one of the most pressing, the protection of the green belt or the green lung that the Upper Roach Valley provides. It stops urban sprawl, providing a natural barrier to the merging of Rochford, Rayleigh, Southend, Hawksmoor and Hockley. It maintains the distinctiveness of those areas, sustains the uniqueness of those communities, provides a respite from the busyness of modern life, a sanctuary of natural beauty to enhance mental health and recreation, a place of scientific interest. How on earth then could it be described as grey belt or green belt that under special circumstances could be built upon? That is simply beyond my understanding. So therefore, committee, in terms of planning law, there are 2 requirements of Greenbelt that I believe are met by maintaining the beauty of Roach Valley, stopping urban sprawl and maintaining the distinctiveness of certain communities. However, it would be remiss of me as a retired head teacher not to draw the committee's attention to the supposed SEND provision that had been stated in the original plans presented by Wimpy Taylor, and the impact of an additional 350 homes upon local school places. Elected members were only informed yesterday that the original provider, Zenith Trust, that was supposed to manage this facility is no longer able to play its part. We were told the delays are in part in determining this application. I think this may well be a case of I think they protest too much, since it has not been that long in terms of planning convention. This suggests that the original intended operator is no longer committed to the scheme. Unless an alternative provider has been secured, members are in fact being asked this evening to consider a development where the educational benefit previously highlighted may now be uncertain or undeliverable. I would say at best this is disingenuous. I am reminded of the promised public service facilities, whether that be health or education, yet to materialise on Kings Hill or Elizabeth Gardens. Will these promises ever be met? So I would ask this committee to seek clarification. Is there a confirmed operator for the SEND provision? Is this facility guaranteed to be delivered? Who will fund it and how will it be managed? Surely the planning benefits attributed to this facility are to be reduced if at the point of seeking approval, there is no operator to actually operate it. This is not awkwardness on my part. This is not electioneering by local councils. It is not NIMBYism by our residents. It is a legitimate planning question because weight given to a benefit surely depends on that benefit being delivered. I'll now move on to my last point, school places. The key question here for the committee to
1 minute,
consider
councillor.
is whether Essex County Council, as the educational authority, has undertaken an assessment of the impact on school places. Head teachers and chair of governors have been planning for a reduction in school places due to the falling national birth rate, not an expansion. Therefore, has the committee seen any evidence, any kind of assessment has been undertaken? So in conclusion, I feel that there are a number of questions this committee needs to ask around the Greenbelt, the impact upon local schools, and the promises made regarding the society community benefit. I do ponder if it's the case of sometimes developers not understanding the promises they are making when they are made. And I would also remind this committee that a graceful refusal may be better than hoping for a promise to be kept.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Mace, please. Again, councillor Mace, 5 minutes. I'll let you know when you have one left.
Chair, thank you. I'm speaking as Hawker West Ward Councillor, representing residents who are deeply concerned about this application. A significant part of this site lies within my ward, with the remainder immediately over the ward boundary. The impact is therefore felt directly by my residents and by the wider local community. There are so many reasons to reject this development of Mount Bovers. I will touch on just 2 of these reasons as they relate to the Upper Roach Valley: the green belt, grey belt issue and sustainability. Nothing will ever convince the 7,000 people who objected to the application that this land will ever not be green belt. Given that the council's own 2020 green belt study points to this being a strong green belt, residents are entitled to expect proper scrutiny on whether this site really performs weakly as green belt, especially given its role in preventing urban sprawl, protecting countryside and maintaining separation. And on sustainability, the council's own assessment raised concerns about this site's relationship to the settlement pattern and existing facilities. I am not satisfied that those concerns have disappeared. This is just an overview. The committee will find more expansive exposition in the written statement by Smart Planning submitted to them on behalf of the Save Mount Bovers Community Group, dated 12th of June. And now we see the addendum issued yesterday afternoon that the council concedes the Greenbelt issue, having come under expert scrutiny. But I continue. My principal concern is the principle of development on this site. This is not just any field. The site sits at the heart of the Upper Roach Valley, which the council's own policies, URV1 and ELA3, protect as a district green lung. URV1 sets the green lung purpose. ELA3 identifies and protects the Upper Roach Valley as a local landscape allocation. So the simple question for members is this: would building up to 350 homes here undermine the Upper Roach Valley green lung? In my view, yes, it would. This land is not just open space on a map. It is part of a wider recreational landscape used by the community for their health and well-being. Residents use the local lanes, bridleways, footpaths and wider routes through and around the Upper Roach Valley for walking, riding, running, dog walking and informal recreation. That is exactly the type of use URV1 is intended to protect. The applicant proposes open space, planting and green infrastructure, but mitigation is not the same as policy compliance. If the development itself undermines the green lung function, then landscaping on the site does not cure the breach. Once part of the green lung is urbanised, it is gone. That harm is permanent and irreversible. Having listened to the residents, read the papers and considered the local policies, I urge the committee to say clearly that this council would have refused the application had it not gone to the planning inspectorate. If members agree that this council would have refused the application, I ask officers and legal to ensure that the council's appeal position reflects the committee's decision. The statement of common ground must be amended so these matters are not treated as agreed. Given the appeal timetable, I also ask that appropriate expert witnesses are engaged at pace so the council can mount a robust defence of the Upper Roach Valley green lung and the reasons members have identified. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, please. 5 minutes, councillor, and I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Well, all I've really got to say has been said before. So I'm going to try and keep it fairly short and sweet and precise, because this is a bit more about procedural than general. So, for example, there's 3 things I want to talk about. The fact that it doesn't qualify as grey belt. There is no flooding test ever been done. It's a known flood area, but no flooding test was ever done. And there's lots of good quality agricultural land being the 3rd thing. Land has to meet 5 criteria. We've heard it from the planning officer. I'm not going to go through it now. Just make you bored, won't it? To be considered as a green belt, the council's own green belt study, referred to just now actually, says that the land meets 4 of the 5 criteria to meet green belt status. Taylor Wimpey cannot assertion that the land does not contribute to the purpose is entirely inconsistent with the data published by the council. Who's right? The officer's agreement with the applicant here is a little hard to understand because you can't both be right. Have I missed something? The risk of flooding in an area considered low risk is also, though, as we've heard, within a critical drainage area, CDA. This presence in a CDA has actually been given little weight. Footnote 53 of the NPPF, a flood risk assessment should accompany an application on land that has been identified by the Environment Agency as having critical drainage problems, or has been. It's because it's susceptible to surface water flooding and lies within the CDA. Taylor Wimpey accept the site is within the CDA in their flood risk assessment, but haven't carried out a test or a survey. Officers consider that surface water will be mitigated on site. We've seen it, haven't we, with the lagoons and all sorts of things up there. However, it's not only the risk of surface water flooding, it's also within a CDA. We can't be surprised if it floods. The third thing, and again, I'm keeping this short because I want to go home eventually too. In the applicant's own submission, the project will cause a loss of grade 3B agricultural land. The agricultural land survey requires many factors before you can actually declare land to be of a certain quality. Soil depth, microstress depth, and should all be taken together to establish the ALC grading on the site. However, the applicant's assertion that the land is grade 5, land is grade 3B, is because they only did one sort of test. There's a whole raft of tests they need to do. The only one they did was soil wetness. So they went around the site, half dozen, whatever it is, soil samples. Oh, it's wet, therefore it's a 3B. Not good enough, sorry. In the agricultural land classification report, the land actually previously has been classified as grade 1, and we've heard that from others here as well, haven't we? This contradiction is not explained. The land can't be both. It can't be grade 1 and grade 3. I don't know about you, I can't think of 2 things at the same time. The contradiction is not explained. It fundamentally undermines the report, doesn't it? We're finding errors in the procedural issues and the qualification issues in the report, and we're still being asked to believe that it's a correct one. It can't all be, can it? But I missed something there. This development constitutes inappropriate development, and it's in conflict itself with paragraph 153 of the NPPF, despite what we've heard here. It does not protect the Upper Roach Valley, including, of course, it's got an SSSI inside it, and that puts that onward too.
One minute, Councillor. Thank you.
So I'm just about done now. I'm just going to say, as this stands at the moment, there is absolutely no way I can support this thought through scheme.
Thank you. I have one visiting member that's asked to speak, Councillor Hoy. I will allow you 5 minutes. Again, I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Up the right way. Thank you, Chairman. Officers have recommended approval for this report. However, after reading the report and supporting documents, I'm not at all persuaded that the case for releasing this greenbelt land has been made and that refusal should be the decision of this committee. We are being asked to give away greenbelt land and a significant part of the Upper Roach Valley before we have fully satisfied ourselves that the proposal complies with the policies that exist to protect it. This land is not a brownfield site. It is not an allocated building site. It remains greenbelt. It remains part of the Upper Roach Valley. Once developed, the loss of openness, countryside character and the green lung function of this land will be permanent and irreversible. Greenbelt land is protected by national planning policy and the Upper Roach Valley through policies adopted by this council. The emerging local plan has only recently completed Regulation 18 consultation. As matters stand, this site has not been allocated for development. The council is in fact still gathering evidence to determine where development should go in the future, and this area was not taken forward for further testing. There is a reason for that. For that reason, I believe there are legitimate planning grounds on which members could reach a different conclusion from officers. I have some questions for officers to answer and for members to consider. Firstly, can officers expand on how the policies that protect the Upper Roach Valley have been considered in this report? I know the officer has touched on it. I think we deserve a bigger explanation. I ask because the council has adopted specific policies as referenced by our MP Mark Francois to protect the Upper Roach Valley, including policies URV1 and ELA3. And I think members need to understand how these policies have been taken into account before deciding whether this development should be approved. Secondly, is the officer saying that this proposal protects the Upper Roach Valley, or are they saying if it does harm the Upper Roach Valley, but that benefit of harm outweighs it? That's a bit of a convoluted way, I know. I ask because these policies, URV1 and ELA3, were adopted to protect the Upper Roach Valley. If officers believe that there is harm to those policies, members need to understand that clearly so they can decide for themselves what weight should be given to that harm when reaching their decision. They may, as I do, believe there is greater harm than the officer states. That's legitimate. Thirdly, on the concerns raised by Anglia Malta, can officers explain what has changed and why they are now satisfied those concerns can be dealt with by condition? Again, the officer has mentioned this, but I think we deserve a more expansion on that. I ask because local residents already experience flooding and drainage issues, and members need to understand what officers are satisfied that this development would not make those problems worse. We have seen this on other estates. I'm aware of one where these schemes do not work as they are stated to. Finally, the officer mentioned the word severe. We've come across this word before in a Brays Lane application, and it was quite clear then that there is no agreement on the definition of severe. Our MP Mark Francois raised it then. Given that, how has the officer decided the traffic congestion is not severe? What definition has he used? What advice has he taken on that? Correct. If members are not satisfied on these points, they should not feel obliged to follow the officer recommendations. They're entitled to reach their own planning judgment and refuse the application for sound and defensible planning reasons. Thank you.
Councillor Reeves.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Marriott should be speaking first.
Councillor Marriott.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I have some questions. I'll keep it fairly brief. The thing that stands out is we talk about special circumstances, but I would like them to be clarified for everybody in this room, because the way I see it, there must be sites around that are not adjacent to ancient woodland and are not home to protected species. Our wildlife are not inconvenient tenants. And also, with regard to the S106, the elephant in the room is LGR. Now, all the money is supposed to go to Rochford District Council and Essex County Council, and 2 years from now, interestingly enough, a similar sort of timeline as the amount of land we're supposed to have left, seeing the government shifted the goalposts, because previously we were up to date on our building. And also, with regard to S106, it's a subject I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about it not getting spent, is that in light of the Anglian Water needing the Grampian condition, it says on page 96 that Grampian condition on a planning permission restricting the commencement or occupation of a development until undercapacity sewage infrastructure is improved, where there is evidence that existing sewage infrastructure does not have the capacity to receive sewage from a proposed new development. Now, I'm no expert on such things, but I should imagine that will be no overnight job. Anybody who lives in Hockley will know of all the what went on there and how many months it took. And I should imagine that this would also be a large project that would cause months of inconvenience to the residents living nearby. And also, by the time this happens, are we going to be in a situation where this S106, where does the money go? Who oversees it? Who ensures that it gets spent? Because at the moment, it's the devil's own job to get any S106 spent. And on top of that, I share Councillor Booth's concerns about the send part of the application. Well, we don't know. It's supposed to have been the headline act to sell this to us. It's like going to a rock concert and your headline act pulling out. What have you got left to sell the proposal? Please, can somebody enlighten me? Thank you very much for indulging me, Chairman, and thank you very much to Councillor Eaves for giving way.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eaves, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a rather large amount of questions, so please do bear with me. I've been working with the planning department for a number of years, and I do respect the officers, but I have to say respectfully that this report, I'm quite concerned about the some simple errors in there that should have been picked up on. It started off with the first page where it had my ward as being the ward that this was actually in. That's rather basic. So I'm glad that's been cleared up. It's mentioned on a number of times in the report that there are calculations based on CIL, which is Community Infrastructure Levy, for those who obviously we're very much into acronyms. The things we don't have CIL. So why is that in the report? I don't get it. Bus routes I talked about. We've got bus routes 63 and 815 are talked about in the report. 63 is a bus that comes twice a week through the area. 815 is the students' bus for the schools. No mention of bus route number 8, which has been for years the bus that goes through the area. So I'm quite concerned that these sort of things have slipped through. It does actually indicate a little looseness in the report, let's say. Let's start off with sustainability. You'll bear with me because I've got a lot of tags here to look at. One of the things that I think has actually stood out to us has been the fact that there's a lot of weight put on sustainability by buses and bus provision and for cycling and walking in the area. Now, I have been following the cycling and walking infrastructure plan and working with the team at Essex County Council for quite some while on this. And my frustration has boiled over in the fact that nothing has actually come out of it. There's a good deal of detail that comes out in the LC WIP, Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. But there are good reasons for that not actually happening. I had meetings programmed in my diary for March and for 2 weeks after the election. The purpose was to actually look at quick wins that we could do from the LC WIP. Both those meetings got cancelled because nothing had been done. Now, when I looked into the history of the cycling and walking plans of the area, I found a multitude of reports. We've got the Transport Assessment 2006 Active Travel Assumptions, July 2025 Summary of Rochford Cycling and Walking Plans, October 2025 the LC WIP, 2018 Rochford District Council Cycling Action Plan, 2015 JAP Area Greenway Network revised in February 2016, September 2014, walking and cycling improvements. July 2014, Rochford Area Action Plan. 2012, Hockley Area Action Plan. 2011, Core Strategy Submission, paragraphs 157/8. I've found reports going back to 2001 saying that we need to have cycling and walking infrastructure in the area, and that there are plans within all of those reports as to those coming forward. The fact is that none of those have happened. And there's a very good reason why. In my conversations with the LC Whip, bearing in mind the size of the Rochford district and the miles that there is of sustained routes, or suggested routes rather, in the LC Whip, 95% of them are on road. It is quoted to me reliably that that would cost £1 million a mile. We are looking at an area that's about 55 square miles in the Rochford district. Now, you don't have to be a mathematician to understand that that is going to take an awful lot of roads and an awful lot of money to actually put that together. Now, there's a reason why I say that, because there's a heavy reliance in this report of future improvements coming forward, which include in many places here the cycling and walking infrastructure. It's specifically mentioned as being this new site being linked to it. The only cycling and walking infrastructure that is substantial here is within the site. Well, that's not going to link anything up, and it's not going to help in the safety. I have a family who lived in Hawkle Chase, which is just down the road from where I live, which is about a quarter of a mile away at most from where this site is. They moved out of this area specifically because they are very keen cyclists and it's too dangerous. So it is an important part, and I hope the inspector, when he actually considers the things that we are concerned about here, understands that despite our many multitude of reports with regards to putting some of these cycleways and the likes in place, that they're obviously not going to happen. It's demonstrable that it's not going to happen by the amount of reports we've had over the years with no movement, with nothing being put in place. So I suggest that when we look at this in the light of the report here as part of the sustainable element of the report, we ignore it, because it is not possible to actually have any cycling and walking infrastructures put in place. Now, I'm not going to mention any names, but I had a talk with a senior officer in the council, and in conversation, that officer admitted to me that it's never going to happen. Why? Because of finance. It's never going to come forward. It's far, far too expensive. So that's one thing. Bear with me. Surface water, I think, I'm not going to go on to that because I think that's been covered quite well by some of the other people. The Upper Roach Valley, previous speakers have actually quoted that. And one of the things that I find very difficult here is the fact that we as members are told that we must put great weight to planning law and planning policy. There is this planning policy, and I want to read the piece out of the EORV1 planning policy again that our MP read to us, because it is very relevant. And this, it says, seeks to protect the Upper Roach Valley from development so that it can become a vast area for informal recreational opportunities. The council will protect the area from development that would undermine the aim. Well, how has a planning policy all of a sudden become something that we don't take any notice of? I'm beginning to get a little bit concerned about that. The assertion in the report that this will create a new destination. I'm struggling to understand this. This is another reason being why I think the report lacks local knowledge. The area that is proposed to be the green space in the proposal is already used as a place where walking clubs, cyclists, and already go there. So all this is going to do is maintain the status quo. It's not going to actually provide a new destination. If you're talking about the SEND school being a destination, I think 10 pupils being there is very hard to actually classify that as a destination. The only destination we've got here is for people going home. The upper Roach Valley, I've been through that. Now, this is a serious concern, and I think this is one that actually warrants probably the most looking at another microscope. The Grampian clause. Now, we talked about this when we've been discussing this in previous times for this particular application. I've seen a report that actually classifies this area in sewerage terms, red. What that actually means is that the area has not got capacity for sewerage link, and there is nothing planned for putting improvements in place to cope with that. Now, the way that the officer has dealt with this is to introduce the Grampian clause, which is good, but on page 23 and over the page, foul water contamination Grampian condition, over the page 24, paragraph 44, it is reflected in what is said later in the report, and I'm going to read the whole thing. No development shall commence unless until details of the proposed means of foul water sewage disposal, including any deposits for associated off-site infrastructure improvements, if required, and an agreed timetable for the works have been submitted to and been approved in writing by the local planning authority. Thereafter, all development shall be undertaken in accordance with the approved details and in accordance with approved timetable for implementation. Should off-site works be required, then there shall be no occupation of any dwelling until those approved off-site works have been completed. Now, this is the next bit that I want you to take particular notice to. In the event of the agreed off-site works are not completed in full by the time of the first occupation, detailed interim on-site measures for the disposal of foul water sewage shall be agreed in writing by the local planning authority and shall be installed prior to the first occupation of the site. The interim work shall be removed when the permanent connection is made. Now, bearing in mind what I said about the current situation of sewage provision there, it is not unreasonable to conclude that this actually is going to be a long time before the proper connection is going to be in place. In that case, those last two sentences there, where the officers have given the developer a get out by having a temporary situation there, 350 houses, I would suggest, is going to produce quite a lot of foul water. To be regularly emptying that off the site there, I would suggest you're going to have a large tanker there quite often. What happens if that tanker breaks down? What happens if that tanker gets caught in traffic? What happens if that tanker gets into an accident? What happens if there's contractual issues with the people who do that? The thing is that what you will end up with, if there are problems with that temporary situation, you will end up with very serious contamination. And I think that at the very least, you'll get smells from it. And I think it is unreasonable to expect residents of this particular site to accept that. So therefore, I'm going to suggest that those last two sentences, which give a temporary situation on the Grampian clause, be removed. So the only way that this site will be occupied will be if there is a permanent connection to the sewer. Last one, I think I'll go on to, because I know other members wish to speak, but I do want to actually finish off with something else. Land quality. The Greenbelt assessment has been very largely relied on by the land quality assessments that are provided. I'm sorry, I'm coming to an end. But I recently stumbled on a report by the Campaign for Protection to Rural England, headed UK farmland at risk under system using 1940s data, new report reveals. In reading that, I was absolutely shocked to find out that the data that is relied on for LQAs dates back to 1940. How can that be reliable? The quality of land as it is farmed or as there are floods, it changes. To rely on data that is 85 years old is really quite, well, if I'm being kind, I'd say questionable. There are a number of issues that I think that we could reliably suggest a refusal on, and I'm going to suggest that we do look at refusal issues, although I know that other people are looking to bring other issues. So I'm just going to put these forward as initial reasons for refusal, if I may. The site should be excluded from development going on the URV1, which is our policy. Greenbelt, preventing urban sprawl. The contradiction here is that the Greenbelt study that we had done for the council, this is in 2020, says it gives us, this area gives a strong contribution to the Greenbelt. I don't see that anything physically has changed on the site. So I think that that's a reason for refusal. The site is unsustainable. We are relying on buses alone. Buses alone. Trains too far away. I've demonstrated, I think, quite ably that the cycling and walking infrastructure, although it is very peppered with lots of reports and good ideas, it's unattainable. The Anglian Water objection. The impact on local schools and the impact on NHS provision. I want to conclude by one thing that I've learned through bitter experience. The statement of common ground, if there is a statement of common ground that is actually coming out of this particular meeting, then I would ask that officers be minded that the statement of common ground be based on what is discussed in this meeting. If they think otherwise, then they must refer back to the minimum of the chair and vice chair of the council. Last time we were involved in this kind of situation, we were kind of hoodwinked because I turned up to be a witness for the appeal, only to find that the previous afternoon, the statement of common ground had been put in, which took the rug right out from underneath us. That is not fair to anyone who is actually going to be a witness for the council. So I would be very mindful that the officers bear that in mind, please. Thank you. I'm sorry I was so long.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got some small things still left. I won't go back over what members have done because I think that would just be wasting time. But there's certain things that I believe need to be mentioned. If you bear with me 1 second. Health contribution, what will be provided? Because we know before that we've had applications where there's money provided for health and no one wants to put the doctors in and the surgeries, so that you're wasting your time there. When it comes to education, it says primary education. There's no mention of secondary education. I presume they're only children, small children moving into these properties, if that's the case. Which schools are they looking to expand? Because at the end of the day, the schools are nowhere near. They're the other side. I think the nearest one is Westrings, as far as primary schools are concerned. I won't go into the buses because I've got a long bit on that. About biodiversity net gain, could there be a net gain given what is being destroyed? I'm going to come back to my last one, which is in the presentation, it was said that there'd be no trees or hedgerows taken out. I can't see how you're going to put the access road in right where that large hedge is unless you're going to take it out. Also, along the edge of the road there, you've got, it might be a bit of rough parking, but that parking along the front of that road has been used for donkey's years by the companies that were opposite, and they still use it. I'd like to know what would happen to that. Councillor Efti, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman and fellow councillors, members of the public, I've carefully considered the officer report and the recommendations before us. Firstly, I do not accept the assertion that the council has only a 1.97 year housing land supply. This figure is based on housing targets imposed on Rochford district by the current Labour government. In my view, these targets are excessive and do not reflect the actual housing need of our district. If housing requirements are based on sustainable local need, Rochford would be able to demonstrate almost a 5-year housing land supply and would not be exposed to the level of speculative development we are currently experiencing. A local plan will evidence population sustainability when it goes in, hopefully. Having considered the report in full, I believe that the adverse impacts of this development significantly and demonstrably outweigh any benefits. One, what is the quality of the land? I would like to have deferred this for an independent report, but as this has already gone to a planning inspector, can't really do that. The site lies within the protected Upper Roach Valley special landscape area of designation intended to safeguard the distinctive character and appearance of the parts of the district. Furthermore, I do not accept that this land would be regarded as grey belt. In my opinion, it makes an important contribution to the purposes of the green belt and to the rural character of the area. Development of this site would result in a permanent loss of valuable open countryside and cause lasting harm to the landscape. My greatest concern, however, relates to the foul water infrastructure. While I appreciate that this is not strictly a planning consideration for the purposes of determining this application, it is an issue that cannot be ignored. This application has already been appealed for non-determination, and whatever the decision taken by the committee tonight, I would strongly urge that the planning inspector be formally advised of the serious concerns regarding wastewater capacity. The local sewage network, Anglian Water, are already operating at or near capacity. Anglian Water has confirmed that there is currently no available capacity to accommodate this development. The officer's recommendation relies on a Grampian condition, which merely requires a strategy to be agreed before development commences. In my view, this does not provide sufficient protection. I would therefore urge the planning inspector to secure through a binding Section 106 agreement and requirement that Anglian Water confirm all necessary foul water infrastructure upgrades are fully funded, delivered and operational before any development on this site can begin. So for those reasons, I don't feel I can support this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hookway, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the other councillors and their points that they've made. I agree wholeheartedly with them. There was a particular matter, I think, which has been touched on by Councillor Reeves in relation to land quality, and where we've had the agricultural land classification. Now, the officer stated that the classification is based on Natural England's grading. However, who provided the report? Who paid for it? I'm presuming that it would have been the developer who commissioned this report. The grading is obviously poorly substantiated. We can see with our own eyes that the land has been used for high quality arable crops. And if it wasn't so, the yields would be good. The farmer would not be producing those crops if they weren't good. It will also seem to be that the grading was, the decision on the grading was come to from a few sample areas and didn't cover the whole of the land. And therefore, it would seem that the grading has been pushed over the whole site and not just in the areas where the wetness issue was found. So I think that that is a key issue. We don't know if the agricultural land classification and the report that provided it has been independently assessed. No, I would think that that would be something that should be looked into, especially prior to any appeal process. I would put more weight on the impact of the sensitivities to the Hockley Woods site. We have seen in some of our policies about buffer zones, and this site is in a buffer zone, and it can be determined that high harm can come from development in a buffer zone related to a site of special scientific interest, which Hockley Woods is. There are also other woodland areas which are important to our district. I don't believe that the methodology and the evidence is substantial enough to meet the grey belt criteria. I believe that this is a green belt area. We have local policies that protect that green belt, and we should be very forceful in pursuing our local policies on that basis. That's all I've got to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Constable, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to go over a lot of the points that have already been taken, but on page 17, it talks about the drainage of the site, surface water. It says the site is in a critical drainage area, water butts to be considered for each dwelling. That's not really handling surface water. We live in an area, if anyone that has done any digging in the garden, we are in a heavy clay area, and clay goes on layers. So they talk about permeability of the ground, but it's clay. So it's going to reach one clay level, maybe two, and then it's going to run off the site. Now, they're talking about the attenuation basins and suds. And I understand how suds work. It releases water at a set flow. But where's that water going to go? There's no drains in that area. There's no ditches for it. So where's it going to end up? It's going to end up in the sewerage system, which we've already been told is critical. Page 44, the purpose of safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. It is acknowledged that development of the site would result in encroachment in the countryside at a local level, which is an inherent constraint. Now, I've looked at that map up there showing that amount of area, and if that's not encroachment into the countryside and taking away green area, I do not know. The first page of the report states that this is Metropolitan Green Belt. It doesn't state that it is Metropolitan Grey Belt, because I don't think that exists. Page 45, it talks about the being a particularly sustainable location. Part of the MPPF states sites should be within 20 minutes walk from a railway station. Well, I don't even think Usain Bolt could do that in 20 minutes. So that is another objection. So I agree with everything that's been spoken, and I'm not in favour of this development. Whilst I'm speaking, Mr. Chairman, we've been going for 2 hours now. May we take a very short 5-minute comfort break, please?
I'm sure we can arrange to do that. I'm sure some people would probably like to go outside and get some fresh air because it's very hot in here. And I'd like to thank, at this point, the members of the public for being, we understand how sensitive this subject is, and thank you for being patient. If we take a 5-minute recess and be back at 9.
Good evening, all. I tend to look at things from more of a business perspective because it's my mindset. In the application, this land has been farmed since 1874, best part of 150 years. What I'm trying to get to grips with, at what point did it become poor quality farmland? And from a business perspective, you've got a farmer planting crops year after year that takes many months to grow, time, effort, and money. Obviously, he's got to produce a good yield to make a profit, to obviously reinvest and go again the next year. So my way of thinking is he wouldn't invest all this time if the land was poor quality, which makes me believe that the land is not greyback land, it's greenback land. To lose this farmland results in roughly 180 tonnes of wheat a year, which equates to 280 loaves of bread. In fine terms, that's a lot of bread. And I can't support this application on the fact that it's poor quality ground.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reeves, you moved the motion for refusal. Did you have a seconder for that?
Yes, I do, but I believe Councillor Webb has indicated to speak.
Thank you.
I don't know if
I
you
have
can allow
Councillor
that.
Knight first.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I have, yes.
Thank you.
I have a seconder.
Councillor Knight, please.
Thank you, Chair. Everything I was going to say about this development has already been covered at great length. All I can add is how can this council ignore their own policies in protecting the Upper Roach Valley, our green lung? Question for you. If this is approved under special circumstances, what is in place to stop another parcel of the Upper Roach Valley being proposed for development under very special circumstances? The agricultural land classification report showing that up to 42% of the site may actually comprise of grade 3A, best or most versatile agricultural land, and severe infrastructure deficits that will force 350 car-dependent household onto an already strained B1013 via unlit, unpaved. This site is fundamentally the wrong location for a sustainable growth. For the future of Hawkwell, the safety of our wider environment and the integrity of policy GB1 and URV1, I urge the committee to seriously consider how it can agree to these flawed grey belt claims or support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Webb, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't repeat all of the comments that have been made this evening, but I have listened with great intent to the debate tonight. I cannot be supporting this application for the reasons that have been already mentioned by the committee. I would just like to add 2 points to the discussion, if I may. The first is the public right-of-way that is currently pending with ECC. That wasn't mentioned tonight, but that is apparently going through at the moment as a public right-of-way. It was mentioned that people do currently walk through the site, but that is going through Essex County Council to become an official public right-of-way. So I think the public need to be made aware of that. And the second is just picking up from the point that Councillor Eaves made around sustainability and using the buses. My children use the buses on a regular basis, and the amount of times that I have to go to pick them up from school because the bus hasn't turned up. Now, the number 8 is notorious. My children can't catch it because it doesn't turn up. I've just checked how often the number 8 bus turns up. Allegedly once every 30 minutes if you're lucky. More often than not, once every 60 minutes. Memory serves, about a year ago, there was some talk about the number 8 not even running on a Sunday. Now, it doesn't run on a Sunday, well, there we go. So how that will be sustainable, Councillor Booth made the point that there's 3 years worth of funding coming. What happens in year 4? Because that number 8 bus service is not going to serve that group of people, that 350 households. So in summary, Chairman, I support all the comments that have gone before. I cannot support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Rees, would you like to state your reasons for refusal, please?
The site should be excluded from development based on URV1 and ELA3, which supports the URV1. The wording of that, as far as we are concerned, is clear, and we have been instructed in past to give great weight to the policies. The second one is the green belt to prevent urban sprawl. The reasoning there is the Greenbelt study from 2020 that stated the area gave strong contribution to the area. On advice, I'm considering whether we put all of these in that I mentioned earlier on due to the timescale that we have to get the evidence together for the appeal, because it's a very short timescale. I do believe that the site is unsustainable. More importantly, the Anglian water objection is one that I believe is a serious one that could, if it's given the condition as written in the report, it could give serious concern for environmental damage with the temporary works. I'd like to take advice on the last two that I actually put in, because I'm not sure whether these ones, although they are real objections, whether they are ones that we could sustain. The impact on local schools and impact on the NHS. Now, I know they are real objections. They have a real effect. But in terms of this particular application, I'd like to have advice on those two being part of the objections list, please.
I'll ask the officer if she can advise you, councillor.
Thank you, members. So as you're aware, so taking them in order. So the first one you mentioned is schools. Essex County Council are the education provider and they make no objection to this application. Therefore, I think it would be a very difficult one for you to sustain, because you'd have to prove that you know the education system better than Essex County Council. That's not to say that you can't do it, but it is difficult. And my advice is that given they are the statutory provider and they aren't objecting, I would not add that. If my advice is you do not add that as a reason for refusal. And similarly, the NHS facilities, again, as you say, they've been consulted, they have not objected to the application subject to a funding contribution being required. So again, given that they have not objected, then an inspector is likely to place significant weight on the fact that that statutory person has not objected. My advice would be that you do not add that as a reason for refusal on the application.
Thank you. I'm aware that the public would have a very different view on this, but what we have to bear in mind is things that we can defend at appeal. If the statutory body have told us that they don't have an objection, we have a problem. We will not be able to defend it. So I'm going to take the officer's advice on this one. And I know that's not going to go down very well, but it is the sensible suggestion. We have got good reasons here for turning this down. So we have got the reasons that I have listed, and I believe that they are firm. Thank you.
Can I just ask you to bullet point the reasons for refusal, because obviously members are going to need to come back and talk on it.
Okay, again. Firstly, the site should be excluded from development based on URV1 and the ELA3 policies within the council's own data. The green belt, we believe that has been misclassified as grey belt, based on the Greenbelt study in 2020 that stated that this area gave a strong contribution to the Greenbelt. The site is unsustainable from the point of view of, in particular, cycling and walking, and the buses, although there is a large contribution to it, the long-term sustainability is a question. Anglian Water, the objection there would be to back up Anglian Water's objection based on information that we have received regarding the capacity and the ability to put effects in place or improvements in place in future. That's 4. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Webb, you seconded this, I believe.
Councillor Marriott.
You're seconded, right, okay. I've got 2 speakers down at the moment. What I need to, you're speaking on the refusal, not on the recommendation as printed, okay? Councillor Stanley, you've indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Just to try to put things in a little bit more perspective, is you only get out what you put in. And if the farmer's been farming for so many years, then he's obviously getting out what he puts in.
Councillor Stanley.
And that's on the refusal side. On the refusal side, I have to agree with the comments made by Councillor Eaves, and that's as far as I can go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ghosh.
As I wanted to mention that whatever Councillor Eaves already mentioned, I fully totally agreed. But one point I would like to just get advice from the officer, because I have seen that there is a clearly mention about the NHS, and what they have seen, I can clearly see that fundamentally I have concern about that planning consideration because of the local healthcare provision. I don't think it been properly explained. What I have seen here, that the applicant, they clearly mention that the applicant own evidence confirms at paragraph 2.385 that there is already a deficit in local GP provision. And yeah. Okay. That's
with the refusal, unfortunately, you can't.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, because refusal has been put forward.
Okay,
and seconded.
I just wanted to ask from the officer point of view whether we can add it, but it's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Councillor Hookwhite, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered if Councillor Eaves would like to add another point to his list for refusal in relation to the land quality and agricultural land classification, whether we should, as this is definitely something which is visibly doesn't match, whether we could request that matter be brought up, or even whether an independent survey could be done.
Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I'm in trying to actually define what I was doing, I missed that one. So yes, if we could actually put that one as item 5, the land quality assessments are based on data that is too old to be relied on.
Thank you. Councillor Esty.
Thank you, Chairman. You spoke, just for clarification, you spoke about the Essex Education. Is that talking about the SEND school or the other local schools over the other side?
It would be both.
Because surely the SEND school would be slightly different? Or is the SEND facility?
It's still within the education.
Yeah, where they've withdrawn it. So
can we keep this to one meeting, please?
Yes,
So one person speaking at a time.
Yes,
Thank you.
I believe that they are both under the Education Authority. So because we do have a problem in that the authority who will be given great weight in the appeal, I think we are on a hiding to nothing on that one. I know that that is ultimately frustrating, but you know the situation. If the statutory body says that there's no problem, we're on a hiding to nothing.
Okay, even with the people who are going to operate it pulling out at the last minute.
Thank you, councillors. I'm aware of the time. I'm also aware that everybody appears to be on the same sort of page here. We have a motion put forward by Councillor Reeves, seconded by Councillor Marriott. Those in favour of...
Sorry, Chair.
My apologies.
Can I ask that officers address the likelihood of successful and successfully defending the appeal on the grounds as put forward, so you have been fully advised before you decide on your grounds, please?
Did you wish to come in there, Emma?
Yes, thank you. So the officers are working on the detailed wording as members have specified, but as part of making sure that we have really robust decision making here today, we need to make sure that you're fully informed of everything before you go to the vote, because that will then help with the ultimate decision that will be going to the appeal and what you'll be doing. So in terms of the areas that you have got for refusal, the first one is around the conflict, as we see it, is the conflict that you believe there is with the current local plan, particularly in relation to the Upper Roach Valley. You'll know from the report, and you'll know more generally from the work and the training that you've had, local plans are required by regulations to be considered for updating every 5 years. The Rochford local plan is over 15 years old at the moment. That doesn't automatically mean you should dismiss all the policies within it, but you need to consider their weight on the basis of whether they conflict with national policy or whether things have changed. Now, obviously, since the local plan was adopted, significant changes both in national policy and in housing need have occurred. If you then go to paragraph 11 in the National Planning Policy Framework and in the presumption of favour of development section, you will see that where there is no relevant development plan policies, or whether the policies which are most important for determining the application are out of date, and one of the reasons for being out of date is that we can't meet the 5-year housing supply, which we can't, then the application, we must grant permission unless the application of the policies in the framework provides a strong reason for refusing, or any adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So I just wanted to make it clear to members that is the basis on which we have given those policies less weight, and so your argument will be that you consider that there is a different amount of weight that you wish to give to those policies as part of the reason for refusal. So that's the first element. So the second element in relation to Greenbelt, I think Caroline is going to take you through. We just need to be really clear as to those the clear areas of Greenbelt policy that Arwell took you through at the beginning. We just need to be really clear as to which of those you wish you do not agree with, and therefore do not consider that the land is grey belt. So Caroline's just going to do that for you.
Before you jump in, Caroline, if I could just get the legal officer to pop in, please.
In relation to the Upper Roach Valley policy that Emma just mentioned, I want to emphasize that because of the policy position, there is a great risk that you may face costs for unreasonably refusing on that ground. So my advice to you is that there is a high risk that that may happen.
Would you like to come back in there, Caroline, please?
Thank you, Chair. So as Arwell set out earlier, the tests as to whether grey belt within green belt qualifies. So grey belt is a subset of green belt, and the question is, does it strongly contribute to the green belt purposes set out in paragraph 143 of the MPPF A, B and D. We've already discounted D. So, and Councillor Eaves alluded to A, which is, does it check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas? And we're talking about this specific site. So you then go to, just looking at A, first of all, you then go to the MPPG, which tells you how you can assess whether it actually does contribute to that purpose. So a strong feature would be something along the lines of, and in fact this is the exact wording I should say, be adjacent or near to a large built-up area, and if developed results in an incongruous pattern of development such as the extended finger of development into the greenbelt. So they're the features that would make a site contribute strongly to the purposes of greenbelt as set out in paragraph 143. So I think from what I've heard, just also you referred to the Greenbelt study from 2020, which actually predates the national framework which introduced grey belt. So it's probably unwise to maybe refer to that particular study. There is more.
Can we have quiet, please, and let the officer speak?
That's incorrect.
Well, it's not incorrect that the 2020 study predates the 2024 national.
Can I
policy.
have, I'm really sorry, but we are debating, listening from the, taking advice from the officers. If we could hear the advice, you may not like it, but we still have to accept the advice from the officers. Thank you.
Thank you. So there is a 2025 LUC study that's been carried out as part of the evidence base for the emerging local plan, which does refer to those purposes as well. And the report sets out why officers from a planning application point of view have taken a different view to the conclusions in that study. Nevertheless, so from what I'm hearing the committee is saying, you are saying that it still has a strong, it meets the strong purpose because it is adjacent to a settlement edge, so it contributes meaningfully to preventing urban sprawl. Is that correct? So therefore it would make a strong contribution?
Yes, I must actually add another thing. One of the things that Arwell did say when he was introducing the Greenbelt is that the rules are applied on judgment, not on calculations.
Correct.
And I think that it's quite clear that the committee are coming to a different judgment here to what the officers are for good reason.
Which is absolutely fine. I just wanted to clarify that that's the reason why you consider it makes a strong contribution, is because it's adjacent or near to a large built-up area. That's one of the reasons you think it makes a strong contribution. Fine. And then purpose B, which we have, is to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another. This relates to towns, not villages. I don't think you specifically alluded to that, but are you then saying that it forms part of a gap, a substantial gap between towns? Was this something that, so the strong features, according to the PPG, and this is the guidance that government says we need to look at when we're coming to a judgment on whether it contributes strongly, is it forms a substantial part of a gap between towns, and or the development of which would be likely to result in the loss of visual separation of towns. So they're strong features.
If I could just help on this one, if you go to page 41, paragraph 223, what we have there is a contradiction, and it actually underlines the fact that there is a judgment call here. We've got the planning practice guidance advises that this relates to, there is no definition of sprawl or large built-up areas in the MPPF. The planning practice guidance advises that this relates to the sprawl of large built-up areas and that villages should not be considered large built-up areas. However, 2 lines down, this study also recognises other settlements within Rochford district as being large built-up areas, including Hawkwell merged with Hockley.
I think we're agreeing.
So it's sorry, that's page 41, paragraph 2.23.
Before you continue, I need to ensure that members are aware that we're running out of time. We need to vote on whether you're happy to extension of time only when we approach the 2.5 mark. The meeting has now lasted roughly 2.5 hours. I would like to move a motion without notice in line with the committee procedure rule 9 to extend this meeting for a further 30 minutes. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. My apologies, you can now continue, councillor, please.
I believe it was over to Caroline.
I think in some way we are agreeing. So it's making a strong contribution to preventing sprawl between those large built-up areas. So it would be adjacent or near to a large built-up area, which we agree what Hockley is, and if developed, it would result in an incongruous pattern of development.
Yeah, if you look at the plan, it actually puts a finger into the green belt.
Okay, thank you. And then, subparagraph B is to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another, and the strong contribution, so you can, is according to PPG, forming a substantial part of a gap between towns, and the development of which would be likely to result in the loss of visual separation of towns. So that's what makes a strong contribution. You didn't allude to that, but that doesn't.
I think there are other points that are stronger, but having said that, we do have reports within the report, items that, paragraphs that do actually state that the site will be incongruous until it is all matured.
Thank you. That's fine. So we'll note that in the reason for refusal. And then the second part of the test for whether something is grey belt and then can be developed, the appropriateness tests, is the use of the land. Here we're asking then, would the proposed development on grey belt fundamentally undermine the purposes taken together of the remaining green belt across the area of the plan? From what you've said, I would articulate that as saying that the scale of the proposal would result in a permanent loss of openness, and the proposal would not incrementally not undermine the wider functions of the greenbelt. Sorry, would undermine the wider functions of the greenbelt. So it can't therefore properly be considered to be grey belt or avoids fundamental harm to the strategic purposes of the greenbelt.
I think I'd probably refer back to the original SAM assessment on that. I know that that isn't relevant to this necessarily, but it has to be considered in that it is being considered as an inappropriate site for development. This is opportunism by the developer, I believe, on that matter. I know that that's rocky ground, but it is something that locally we consider is an issue.
Thank you. For the purposes of grey belt, though, deciding whether it is grey belt, the judgment of the committee is fundamentally it doesn't prevent, it doesn't strongly contribute to purpose A.
It doesn't or does?
So it's open countryside, and it strongly contributes to preventing sprawl of towns, of large built-up areas.
Yes, going by the officer's report that I've quoted, the paragraphs in there, 2.23 of page 41.
Okay, thank you.
Emma, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so I think that deals with Greenbelt. So then moving on to the next potential reason for refusal you had was around the unsustainability of the site. So again, just to make clear to members, there is no objection from Essex County Council on the basis of sustainability as the Highways Authority. So there will be no evidence from them to be presented on this matter. Officers obviously considered that the site could be made sustainable, and therefore it will probably be for members to justify that they consider that the site is unsustainable, primarily relating to the lack of public footpaths and an effective bus service across the site. So I think that's the basis of what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I think I've ably demonstrated that there is a desire, and there has been for many, many years, for there to be official, safe walking and cycling infrastructure. But the reality is that it's never going to happen. We've got documentation of 25 years worth of proposals that have never happened. And I think that how can you get any more certain than that this is not likely to be something that's going to be implemented?
If I can just bring the legal officer in here, I'll be obliged. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, to go back to the Greenbelt issue, but I think if the committee's view is that this is Greenbelt, we need to move on to assess very special circumstances so that that assessment is complete and we understand your judgment fully for the appeal, please. Could you kindly take them through it? The only other thing, Councillor Eves, speaking via the chair, is that on the cycling points you've made, the challenge the council will have is that you then have to provide evidence to the inquiry to support your grounds for refusal. And at the moment, the statement of case is due on the 3rd of July. So I think the council is going to have quite a significant challenge in finding an expert to support that particular case and the evidence. So I'm again pointing out the risk of costs for a ground of refusal, potential ground of refusal, which we can't substantiate.
If I can help by trying to find a specialist on this to take the weight off of officers, would that be acceptable to present someone for your approval?
Yeah, my duty is simply to advise you. Whether you follow my advice or not is completely your decision.
Understood.
Emma, would you like to come back in?
Thank you. So you are aware that the tilted officers consider that the tilted balance applies and that the benefits of the scheme are the housing supply for Rochford Council is 1.97. So the benefits are the additional housing, 50% of which would be affordable housing, and the additional infrastructure that would be that would come with the proposal. So in terms of very special circumstances, all the things that have been outlined in the report that we are saying are the benefits, the committee are then weighing that up in the planning balance and saying, regardless of that, the harm that you've identified doesn't amount to those very special circumstances that would outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt and any other harm that you've identified.
Correct.
Is that correct? Thank you.
So I think then you spoke about potentially adding in the agricultural land quality as a reason for refusal. So we've already got 4 reasons for refusal, I think, now around the conflict with policy around the site not being Greenbelt. The site doesn't meet the very special the site is not Greybelt and therefore is considered Greenbelt, but does not meet very special circumstances. And the site is considered unsustainable. Also, sorry, the sewage one, we'll come back to that one in a second. It is better to have a fewer stronger reasons for refusal than throw everything at it and have some potentially that you could be awarded costs against or maybe considered acting unreasonably. So my advice as an officer would be to stick to the ones that you have. And as I say, we'll come back to sewage because I've realised I've missed that one out. But Obviously, it's a decision for the committee, but my advice would be that you don't add the agricultural land assessment into the reasons for refusal as they currently stand, but that is a matter for the committee to decide.
Could I bring the legal officer in, please? Councillor Rees.
What I would like to add to that is I always like to say the application is the one in front of you. The farmer might have had reasons for not continuing to farm that we're not aware about. We can't present evidence that, as far as I know, that would support a case about the value of the land and the classification. And for that reason, again, my duty is to advise the committee that you are at risk of costs for an unreasonable ground if this is refused. The other thing I wanted to say is you only need one good reason for refusal to fight an appeal. You don't have to throw every possible reason into the appeal, because that is what exposes the council to risk. And what the other thing you need to consider is what is the evidence that we can offer in support of our case. And that is the end of my contribution at this point, but it's something that I think members should bear in mind. What I always say to members and the committee is that focus your objections on the issues that involve a judgment call, because that is where you as a decision maker can either accept or reject the conclusions that the officers have put forward in the report. When you get into technical matters that you cannot offer evidence towards at the appeal, that's when you expose the council potentially to risk of costs for unreasonable behaviour. So that's something that I feel I should say at this point.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nagla. I feel the weight of responsibility here is weighing very heavily on my shoulders. We have a full committee here, and I think it would be fair if there are points that others wish to chip in. I'm mindful of that, if it's okay, Chair.
Councillor Hookway, you indicated.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd just like to help Councillor Reeves. I believe that the land quality and agricultural land classification in that report is the applicant is using that particular report to substantiate the applicant's view that the land is grey belt. So I think it would be helpful as part of our argument if that was included as part of our argument and evidence.
I think the strongest point we have at the moment, Councillor, is the sewage being the main one. Obviously, other ones I think need to be added. Councillor Constable.
Yeah, sewerage and surface water. But on page 44 of the officer's report, purpose C, safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. And it says it's acknowledged that development of the site would result in encroachment into the countryside at a local level, which is an inherent constraint. So one of the reasons is encroachment into the countryside. And I refer again to that map. That is a large encroachment into the Green Lung and the Upper Roach Valley. It's not a tiny 3 or 4 houses or a dozen houses, which we normally get. It's a huge site. And that is one of the things I think we could add into it. Thank you.
Councillor Reeves, are you happy to add that in?
I believe so. I think it should be a committee decision, not just me. So if other members are minded to, then yes, I'm happy to add that to that. I do understand what Nagla is saying, our legal representation, but I do think that we do have good grounds for all of these. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, that will be weighed.
Any other councillor wishing to speak? No. In that case, members, any officer wish to comment further?
So just we haven't mentioned the sewage one. So just to cover off that one, which I think is fairly straightforward. So I think what members are saying is essentially as the committee report sets out, but without the condition, so that the proposal, if allowed, would give rise to additional foul sewage flows that can't be accommodated within the current foul drainage network. Essentially, that's your reason for refusal, that cannot be accommodated at present with the infrastructure that is available or is set out in the report.
Yes, and also removal of the last two sentences in that particular clause, giving the contractor the option of a temporary connection.
So if we have that as a reason for refusal, obviously we won't have the Grampian condition in there, because what we're saying actually is it's not what the committee is saying, I believe, is that it's not appropriate to put that condition forward in any way, because what you're saying is you do not want the development to take place because the infrastructure is not there, and therefore you sort of end it, as it were, at that point.
If I could just go to later in the report, there is another listing of the Grampian clause, which makes it quite clear, which doesn't actually follow the initial one earlier on in the report. And that is on page 92, paragraph 2314.314. A response was received from Anglian Water on 22nd of May 25, which stated the existing foul water sewer did not have capacity to accommodate the proposed foul flows from the development. The application states the Rotsford Water Recycling Centre has confirmed there is capacity within the WRC to accommodate the flows. Now, if you just bear with me, because the officer has actually later in this report, page 97, paragraph 2.357, the imposition of a Grampian condition prevents development from proceeding or being occupied before a satisfactory solution is found and implemented, and is a lawful way of dealing with such a situation. That doesn't talk anything about a temporary. So you've got two statements within the report, one with a temporary condition, one without. Which one are we going to?
Can I just bring the legal officer in, please?
So, Chair, can I ask the committee to, or suggest perhaps that the committee approach this question in this particular way? Are you satisfied that you've been provided with sufficient information to show that there's no prospect of the action specified in the condition, in the Grampian condition, being performed within the time limit imposed? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I'm just helping you formulate it in a way that we can possibly, exactly, if I may put it blankly. So that's what I'm asking you, what your assessment is, but you've confirmed that. Thank you.
Always appreciate your advice. Thank you.
So I think, members, that rounds up the reasons for refusal that we have discussed. Appreciating that does take a bit of time to go through, but I hope you'll appreciate that what we're trying to do is make sure that you've got the most robust possible reasons for refusal, so that those reasons can be robustly defended at the appeal. So for those watching and those watching at home, that's why we need to go through that process to make sure that we are in the best possible position for the future appeal on that matter.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to mention that recently the inspector looked at another development site and decided that it was unsafe from that development site for pedestrians and cyclists to go onto the main road. So I would suggest that that might be something else that we can consider, is it's an unsafe from the site to use the highway.
So Essex County Council, as the Highways Authority, their part of their remit is to consider the safety of all road users. They have not made any objections on the grounds of safety. Therefore, I would not recommend that you would add that as a reason for refusal within this application. Although you do have the reason for refusal around the unsustainability of the site. So I would, if my advice is, I would leave it there.
That was just my point of unsustainability from the site going out to the highway for pedestrians and cyclists, where we are promoting that in the NPPF.
Councillor, we may be promoting it, but if Essex County Council don't support it, we're on a lost cause, unfortunately. I think they sit in their ivory house up there in Chelmsford and just go, yeah, bosh. Okay, members, I'm going to ask members to vote on each individual part, please. If I could just ask.
The reason, Chair, thank you for letting me come in. Each reason for refusal needs to be signed off by the committee is because some members may not agree that a particular reason for refusal should be put forward on behalf of the council. Thank you.
Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Chair. Why would we not just do what we normally do and ask, do we want to take these on block? And if people want to say no, then they say no.
Councillors, do you wish to take these on block? Yes. Show of hands, please. Okay, thank you. In that case, members, I'll put this to the vote. Those in favour of refusal on the conditions issued?
Do you not need to read them all out, so we're in full agreement with everyone that's being read out? We haven't.
I don't think we need to read them all out. I think we've all got the gist, but obviously if you'd like that, then obviously I'll ask the officers to read them out. Emma, would you mind?
I just want to summarise their titles. I think what the officers are doing is based on the clarification evidence you're provided will draw up the clear final reasons for refusal. So I wouldn't want to read them out, I don't think verbatim, but the reasons for refusal are the impact on the Upper Roach Valley, that the committee do not consider that the site is grey belt. They therefore consider that the site is green belt. Having then considered the tests of very special circumstances, they do not consider that those tests are met. That the site is considered unsustainable, particularly in relation to the cycling and walking provision from the site, and that the site cannot be served by a suitable foul sewage system.
Chairman, we also had the encroachment into the countryside, which I think we agreed that could be added.
So that is part of the consideration around why you've considered it is not grey belt.
Can it be specified within that point, please, on encroachment?
So we will pick it up as part of your consideration as to why you consider the site is green belt. Will include the specific bits that you've considered, including that one.
Thank you.
Legal officer.
Apologies for intervening again, Chair. Can I ask that a delegation be given to the Director of Planning to draft the reasons for refusal, the detailed reason for refusal in consultation with the Chair and the Vice Chair, so you have sight of the exact wording before it's put forward, please.
Chair. Can I respectfully, can I ask that is circulated to the committee members, please?
That's perfectly fine. What I'm saying, the reason I say this is because we have to be very specific with the grounds for refusal. And at the moment, we've discussed the general position that the committee has taken, and I'm therefore asking the committee to delegate the drafting to the Director of Planning, so we can, rather than at this late hour, sit here and tell you exactly word by word what that is, that it is signed off by the Director of Planning in consultation, if you want, with the committee. But I need to make you aware that there'll be a very short turnaround because of the timescales involved. Thank you, Chair.
Members, you're happy for that to come to the committee? I don't think we have to sit.
No, we won't want it to come to the committee, but
Delegated, I mean.
if Emma could perhaps, when she drafts it, give us a timescale that we have to work to replying if we have any issues with it, then it keeps us on song.
Okay, members.
No, I was just going to say, absolutely, we'll get those out to members as quickly as we can. As Nagla said, we will appreciate a very short turnaround, so we've got the maximum amount of time that we can allow to prep the case for the deadline of submission. And we will be looking to members to provide some of that work as well as part of that appeal process.
Right, members. I'm going to have to put it to the vote now. I'm not sure you're all in favour, but there you go. Those members in favour of refusal, please indicate. I think that is unanimous. Thank you, members. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the residents and participants for coming along and behaving as well as you could. I'm sure we'll be seeing you again at some point. And thank you very much, and have a good and safe journey home.